It's cracked down on illegal immigrant truck drivers following a series of awful.
U.S. Border Patrol is monitoring millions of American drivers nationwide.
In fact, the percentage of long-haul truckers who become murderers is small.
President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social.
At 4:19 inches the morning, on a frozen stretch of Highway 52 inches southern Minnesota, a semi-truck carrying the logo of a major regional carrier slowed to the shoulder. The road was dark, nearly empty, and locked in the deep stillness that comes with 30 below zero temperatures. To the passing cars, this looked like a standard seasonal safety inspection, the kind conducted thousands of times every winter across the upper Midwest. There were no sirens. There was no pursuit. The driver pulled over calmly, the air brakes hissing in the cold silence. On the surface, it was simply a routine check to keep icy highways safe. But as the state trooper began the technical inspection, the atmosphere shifted. The logs didn't match the load. The weight distribution was off. And when inspectors drilled into the sidewall of the trailer, they didn't hit insulation. They hit a concealed compartment running the entire length of the chassis. Inside were vacuum-sealed packages of cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl, stacked with industrial precision. At that moment, the officers thought they had caught a rogue smuggler. They were wrong. As they detained the driver and began to process the vehicle, the suspect didn't ask for a lawyer. He asked for a deal, and the information he gave federal agents in the next hour would turn a traffic stop into a national security crisis. He wasn't working alone. He was part of a ghost fleet, a coordinated group of 83 drivers operating inside one of the Midwest's most trusted trucking companies. They used identical modified trailers, drove fixed routes through 5 states.
The news does not stop on this holiday week. I'm Aisha Hasni, and we are tracking those federal agents arresting more than 100 illegal aliens during that sweep. And it targeted truck companies in California.
And had moved over $85 million in untraceable cash out of the United States. What agents found on Highway 52 wasn't just a drug bust. It was the discovery of a parallel logistics network that had weaponized America's supply chain against itself. Welcome back. To understand how a criminal empire hides inside an 18-wheeler, you have to look at the company on the door, North Star Hauling. For years, North Star was considered a pillar of the regional economy. They moved consumer goods, industrial materials, and heating supplies across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, and Illinois. Their trucks were a common sight on the interstate. But the investigation triggered by the Highway 52 stop revealed that North Star wasn't just one company, it was two. Federal investigators discovered a specific subset of employees, 83 drivers, primarily Somali nationals, who operated under a completely different set of rules than the rest of the workforce. While regular drivers chased demand and fluctuated routes based on weather and fuel costs, these 83 men followed rigid, unchangeable paths. They drove the same corridors, stopped at the same terminals, and operated almost exclusively at night. The genius of the operation was in its camouflage. They weren't hiding in unmarked vans. They were hiding in plain sight, driving the same branded trucks as legitimate employees. This is what military planners call parallel logistics. They use the cover of legitimate commerce, moving pallets of food or steel, to mask the movement of narcotics and weapons in the false walls of their trailers. But the physical movement of drugs was only half the operation. The financial forensics team uncovered a money laundering system that stunned regulators. North Star Hauling wasn't just moving freight, it was a financial pipeline.
Customs and Border Protection told us, the parent agency for Border Patrol, is that they use this technology to help identify threats and disrupt criminal networks, and that they are governed by federal law.
Investigators linked the company's ownership to a web of shell entities with no clear commercial purpose. Funds didn't flow through traditional banks. They moved through informal transfer networks, unlicensed, untraceable, and fragmented. Over a 3-year period, more than $85 million was transferred out of the United States to accounts in East Africa and the Middle East. The transfers were structured to look like small family remittances, broken down into amounts that wouldn't trigger federal alerts. But when aggregated, the data showed a river of cash leaving the American Midwest, funding operations that had nothing to do with trucking. And the most terrifying part? They used the weather as a weapon. Analysts found that the network's activity spiked during the harshest months of winter. They knew that during snowstorms and sub-zero cold snaps, law enforcement resources are diverted to accident response and public safety. Roadside inspections drop significantly because it's simply too dangerous to keep officers outside for long periods. The cartel had turned the Minnesota winter into a strategic advantage, moving their largest shipments when the police were too busy fighting the ice to fight the crime. By the time federal agencies connected the dots, the 83 drivers, the modified trailers, the $85 million, and the winter timetables, they realized that a gradual response would fail. If they arrested one driver, the rest would vanish. The network would scramble. The money would disappear. The decision was made at the highest levels of the Department of Justice and Homeland Security. They wouldn't take them down one by one. They would take them down all at once. The operation was codenamed Northern Breaker. Across 5 states, SWAT teams, FBI agents, and ICE tactical units began mobilizing. They positioned units outside freight terminals in Chicago, warehouses in Minneapolis, and transfer hubs in Sioux Falls. The objective was total containment: secure the fleets, freeze the accounts, and arrest every member of the Ghost Fleet in a single synchronized strike.
But according to the FBI, there are likely hundreds of homicidal truck drivers on our roads who have never been caught.
Many of them have driven across Nevada and have left a bloody trail behind them tonight.
As the sun set on the eve of the operation, the Midwest was hit by another winter storm. But this time, the federal agents weren't retreating from the cold. They were waiting in it. The storm hitting the Midwest wasn't a hindrance. It was the signal. Federal planners knew that North Star's Ghost Fleet operated most aggressively during severe weather, using the snow to mask their movements. Tonight, the network was fully active. Dozens of trucks were on the road, pushing north toward the Canadian border and south toward distribution hubs in Chicago. At 2 a.m., the command center gave the green light. Operation Northern Breaker was live. This wasn't a standard police raid where a single team hits a single house. This was a synchronized takedown across a geographic area larger than France. In Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, and Illinois, tactical teams began to move. On Interstate 94, a convoy of 3 North Star trucks was battling whiteout conditions. They thought the flashing lights behind them were just snowplows. They were wrong. A phalanx of state patrol cruisers and unmarked federal SUVs executed a rolling box maneuver, surrounding the 18-wheelers and forcing them onto the frozen shoulder. The drivers didn't even have time to reach for their radios. By the time the air brakes hissed locked, tactical officers were already climbing the cab steps, weapons drawn. There was no negotiation. The drivers were pulled out into the biting wind and zip-tied against the icy asphalt. Simultaneously, the main assault was unfolding at North Star Hauling's headquarters in Minneapolis. An armored Bearcat vehicle smashed through the chain-link perimeter fence, followed by 2 columns of FBI SWAT operators. They weren't there to serve paperwork. They were there to secure a crime scene that spanned 3 acres. Flashbangs detonated in the loading bay, stunning the night shift crew. Federal agents, down! Get down! As agents swept the facility, they realized the true sophistication of the operation. In the dispatch office, they didn't find standard logistics software. They found a dual system setup.
To some, they may think, well, this is pretty innocent. They made some money off tobacco. It's not innocent. It's organized crime.
One screen showed the legitimate freight consumer goods, heating supplies, timber. The other screen, encrypted and accessible only by a select few, tracked the Ghost Fleet. It showed the real-time locations of the 83 specific trucks involved in the conspiracy. It tracked payment schedules that had nothing to do with shipping rates. It was the nerve center of a shadow company operating inside a legal one. But the physical evidence in the warehouse was even more damning. In Bay 4, investigators found a trailer undergoing maintenance. Panels had been stripped away, revealing the engineering secret behind the network. The chassis had been modified with hydraulic false walls. To a casual observer or a standard X-ray, the trailer looked empty or full of legal pallets. But behind the false wall was a void space capable of holding 500 kilograms of contraband. In this specific trailer, the void wasn't empty. Agents pulled out crate after crate. First came the narcotics bricks of fentanyl wrapped in carbon paper to defeat K9 units. Then came the cash stacks of vacuum-sealed U.S. currency, bundled for export. And finally, they found the weapons. Crates labeled as machine parts were cracked open to reveal upper receivers for assault rifles, high-capacity magazines, and disassembled suppressors. This confirmed the darkest theory of the investigation. The network wasn't just taking drugs in, they were moving weapons out. The supply chain worked in both directions. While the headquarters fell, the dragnet was tightening across the Midwest.
But according to the FBI, there are likely hundreds of homicidal truck drivers on our roads who have never been caught.
In Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a transfer hub disguised as a repair shop was raided by ICE Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. Inside, they found safes containing millions in cash and ledgers detailing transfers to Hawala brokers in East Africa. In Chicago, a North Star truck parked at a quiet industrial lot was surrounded. The driver attempted to flee on foot but was tackled by a K-9 unit. Inside his cab, agents found a satellite phone and a map with marked drop zones that had no correlation to any commercial delivery route. By 5 a.m., the reports were flooding back to the command center. The scope of the arrests was staggering. All 83 targeted drivers were in custody. The dispatchers were detained. The mechanics who built the false walls were in handcuffs. North Star Hauling, a company that had operated for years as a respected regional carrier, effectively ceased to exist before the sun came up. The immediate economic impact was chaotic. Thousands of legitimate shipments were stranded. Food distribution routes were disrupted. Heating fuel deliveries were delayed. The shutdown of a major carrier sent shockwaves through the regional supply chain, proving just how deeply this criminal group had embedded itself into the economy. But for the federal agents standing in the freezing cold of the Minneapolis loading dock, looking at the mountain of seized drugs and guns, the disruption was a small price to pay. They had just severed a major artery of transnational crime.
And then uses that information and other data to try to predict who on the roads is suspicious.
However, as the forensic accountants began to tear through the seized computers, they realized that the $85 million they knew about was just the tip of the iceberg. The financial web didn't just end in East Africa. It looped back into the U.S. banking system in ways that implicated people far more powerful than truck drivers. By the time the sun finally rose over the Midwest, the North Star Hauling headquarters in Minneapolis was no longer a bustling freight terminal. It was a frozen crime scene. Federal agents were cataloging evidence in the snow, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, crates of weapons parts, and enough narcotics to flood the entire region. But the most significant discovery was happening inside the secured server room. As forensic accountants unlocked the company's financial drives, the full scale of the betrayal became clear. The $85 million investigators had initially tracked was a conservative estimate. The Ghost Fleet hadn't just been a side operation. It was the financial engine of a transnational laundering scheme. The books revealed a network of shell companies that existed only on paper. These entities, with generic names and shared addresses, were used to layer the illicit profits before they were funneled out of the country. The money didn't go to banks. It went into the Hawala system, an informal method of transferring value without moving physical cash, making it nearly impossible to trace once it left American soil. The destination of these funds was East Africa and the Middle East. This wasn't just a drug ring profiting from addiction. It was a foreign influence operation using American infrastructure to fund activities abroad. The shutdown of North Star Hauling was immediate and total. Federal authorities froze every bank account, seized every vehicle, and padlocked every terminal across 5 states.
A total of 25,000 kilograms of contraband tobacco was seized with a street value of over $6 million. Other drugs and 15 firearms were also seized.
The company, once a giant of regional logistics, evaporated overnight. The economic ripple effect was felt instantly. Legitimate supply chains were broken. Grocery stores in the Dakotas faced delays. Factories in Wisconsin waited for parts that were sitting in impounded trailers. The chaos proved exactly why this threat was so dangerous. The cartel had embedded itself so deeply into the economy that removing it caused collateral damage to innocent businesses. This case forced a reckoning in Washington. Operation Northern Breaker wasn't just a law enforcement victory. It was a national security wake-up call. It exposed a critical vulnerability in the heart of the United States. We often think of national security as protecting borders or airports, but this investigation proved that the trucks driving next to us on the highway, the vehicles bringing us our food and fuel, can be weaponized. The cartel had exploited the very things that make the Midwest run: the vast, lonely highways, the demand for freight, and even the winter weather. They used the snowstorms as cover, knowing that when the weather is at its worst, American law enforcement is stretched to its limit. They turned our environment against us. In the days following the raid, policymakers and regulators began a massive review of the trucking sector. Questions were asked that had been ignored for too long. How could a fleet of 83 drivers operate on fixed, non-commercial routes for years without being flagged? How could a company move tens of millions of dollars offshore without a regulatory red flag? The loopholes that North Star exploited are now being closed. New oversight protocols are being tested to ensure that parallel logistics networks can no longer hide inside legitimate commerce. For the 83 drivers, the warehouse managers, and the architects of the Ghost Fleet, the road has ended.
The bust took place on May 7th at an industrial park on Chiefswood Road on Six Nations of the Grand River. The OPP say it's the work of a criminal network not connected to residents of Six Nations.
They are facing federal charges ranging from narcotics, trafficking, and money laundering to conspiracy against the United States. The trucks that once carried poison across the Midwest are now evidence in federal impound lots. Operation Northern Breaker proved that no matter how sophisticated the camouflage, no matter how deep the snow, the truth leaves tracks. And when federal agencies coordinate their power, there is no place to hide. This case is a reminder that the safety of our nation relies on vigilance in the most ordinary places, from a shipping container in a port to a routine traffic stop on a frozen Minnesota highway. If you believe that securing our supply chain is critical for national defense, hit the like button, subscribe to follow the next investigation, and share this video to help others understand the hidden wars being fought on our roads.